Oh, that hurt.
From its vessel. Let their granted so the world might be mended. Soul of the lost withdrawn from its vessel. Let strength be granted so the world might be mended. So the world might be mended. This is the Nexus. It holds together the northern land of Volataria. Thou canst not quit the Nexus, but the 5 Archangels will guide thee to the outer lands. Summit the Nexus, but the 5 Archangels will guide thee to the outer lands. Summit the Nexus, but the 5 Archangels will guide thee to the outer lands.
Well, you fished through the fishing tube, did you? You came for demon souls. Or to save this land and be remembered as a hero. Hunting for demons. Try one of the Archstones. Now go. That is why you came, is it not? To this accursed Volataria.
When the Scots, my wife and daughter fell victim to the demons. But I would be worthless in battle. At the very least, I hope to lend my assistance to you brave slayers of demons. I would be happy to lighten your load and look after any excess baggage. Best of luck to you.
You new here. Are you here for my services? The name's Baldwin. I'm just an ordinary blacksmith. It's simple. Just bring me all the souls you can. In trade, I'll give you weapons. Or forge the ones you already have. With your souls, I can eke out a living. And with my weapons, you can go on with it. It's not a bad deal. No interesting.
That's not what I meant to do. Okay.
King Alant the Twelfth, by channeling the power of souls, brought unprecedented prosperity to his northern kingdom of Boletaria. That is, until the colorless deep fog swept across the land. Boletaria was cut off from the outside world, and those who dared penetrate the deep fog never returned. But Valifax of the royal twin fangs broke free from the fog and told the world of Boletaria's plight. That the old King Alant had roused the Old One, the great beast below the Nexus, from its eternal slumber, and that a colorless fog had swept in, unleashing terrible demons. The demons hunt down men and claim their souls. Those who lose their souls lose also their minds. The mad attack the sane and chaos reigns. Valifax also spoke of the enticing power of the demon souls. Each time a demon claims a human soul, the demon's own soul is invigorated by the life force, and the power of a mature demon soul is beyond human imagination. The legend spread quickly. Mighty warriors lured by the possibilities braved the fissure to breach the accursed land, but none have returned. Pure of the twin fangs, yet the silent chief, Saint Urbain, Scurva the Wanderer, the sixth Saint Astraea with her night Garl, and Sage Freight the Visionary. The colorless deep fog slowly creeps beyond Boletaria's borders. Humankind faces slow and steady extinction. The deep fog will eventually swallow all lands near and far. But Boletaria has one final hope. A lone warrior who has braved the baneful fog. Oh, has the land found its savior? Or have the demons found a new slave?
The fact that they're not willing to acknowledge we won at this point is not of much consequence in our planning and what we're able to do between now and January 20th.
Sir, what do you say to the Americans that are anxious over the fact that President Trump has yet to concede and what that might mean for the country?
Well, I just think it's an embarrassment, quite frankly. The only thing that, how can I say this tactfully? I think it will not help the president's legacy. I think that I know from my discussion with foreign leaders thus far that they are hopeful that the United States democratic institutions are viewed once again as strong and enduring.
And you say that you are being able to move ahead without interruption, but what options are you considering? How will you move ahead if the president continues to refuse to concede?
Well, look, access to classified information is useful. It would be nice to have it, but it's not critical. And we're just going to proceed the way we have. We're gonna do exactly what we'd be doing if he had conceded and said we've won, which we have. And so there's nothing really changing.
But not ruling out legal action?
No, I don't see a need for legal action, quite frankly. I think the legal action is you're seeing it play out, the actions he's taking. And so far, there is no evidence that any of the assertions made by the President or Secretary of State Pompeo. Secretary of State Pompeo.
This is Joe Biden reacting coolly and calmly in the aftermath of Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's assertion that Trump will assume power for a second term, despite quite literally losing the election.
There will be a smooth transition. There's a process. The Constitution lays it out pretty clearly. The world should have every confidence that the transition necessary to make sure that the State Department on mid-afternoon will also be successful. I went through a transition on the front, and I've been on the other side of this.
Michigan, should we go forward with massive leads or significant leads? 99% of those states fail to conduct a fraudulent free election?
I'm getting calls from all across the world. These people are watching our election. They understand that we have a legal process. They understand that this takes time. Right? It took us 37 plus days in an election back in 2000. Conducted
About your money, do you feel like it's moving forward, or is it more like a treadmill? You know, like you're trying hard, but not really moving anywhere? Oh boy, you've got treadmill money. When you join a credit union, we help you get off the treadmill and start moving forward. Let's get to suggest that you would are tantamount to a coup, given the indisputable fact that Joe Biden defeated Donald Trump at the ballot box. Votes ahead, and will likely end up with 306 electoral votes. Any way you cut it, Donald Trump handily lost the election. And so with that said, these to acknowledge that Biden won won't change the results, but it does endanger the American people if Joe Biden isn't given the access he needs to begin building out his administration. It takes time and money to begin laying the foundation
people safe, it's about retaining their grip on power. They would rather knowingly and willfully put the American people at risk because too thin-skinned to accept a reality that he lost this race. But sure, these are the patriots. Got it. There are a number of reasons why the GOP is doing what they're doing right now. The first, of course, is money. And so that Trump can continue peppering his supporters with emails demanding funding for this election. Why? Because this entire presidency has been predicated on squeezing as much money out of his supporters as is humanly possible. And so now, with the end in sight, of course Trump would be leveraging one final large-scale effort to squeeze whatever last remaining dimes he can out of his fans. The second reason is Trump's ego. He's predicated his entire presidency on winning. And so for him to acknowledging that he has become the very thing that he's groomed his supporters to be, a loser. And what's worse still, there's been the hand of Joe Biden. Trump has spent months upon months claiming was in cognitive decline and too old and dumb and confused. And so for that guy, the purported Trump by 5 million votes is embarrassing. And pretend that there was fraud. But because his extremely delicate ego doesn't give him any other option. And finally, the last reason is that Trump and his mouthpieces may very well be looking to stage some type of a coup. We've already seen just how unwilling the GOP is to abide by any semblance of the rule of law. They'll happily rewrite the rules and immediately on power. And so faced with the possibility that they might actually have to heed the will of the American people and accept the result of an election, it would be surprising if Trump was trying to hold on to power with measures. While that doomed effort would be un-American, it wouldn't at all be surprising for a president who has the law of the country he's presiding over. Money or power or some combination of the three, he won't succeed. The states will finish counting the votes and those results will be certified. Trump has no say in overturning these results, meaning that no matter how much he pounds his fist or stomps his feet or whether he has to be dragged out of office by the Secret Service. But the fact that he and the rest of his party would try is a testament to just how dangerous these people are. And I don't say that lightly, but the fact that they're actively and willfully undermining faith in our most core institution, our free and fair elections, goes to show that these are not people who believe in democracy. These are not people who believe in itself and the power. So our job is this. Even though the election is our job is to not get confused. It's not to wait until Joe Biden takes office and then turn off the news forever. Because what's happening right now is a preview of what will happen the moment we let our guards down. The future of our democracy depends on the election. It depends on an informed electorate. And it depends on the American people taking a vested interest in what happens in this country. The fight to defend this country won't end on January 20th. And it won't end in 2024. And it won't end in 2028. But the stakes are simply too high to give up. And so as long as we have to fight, we will. If you like this video, check out my podcast, We're going to take a deep dive into the week's most important stories and interview major players in politics, including Kamala Harris, Jim Porter, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Eric Swalwell, Mary Trump, Al Franken, Cory Booker, and many, many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.
Look, I am as surprised as anyone that Florida isn't the swing state in 2020 election, nor is there any kind of Floridian Bush v. Gore style lawsuit that seems like it's going to change the outcome of the election, which is especially surprising given that we have a literal Florida man in the White House. There is no election chaos in Florida. Why did Florida get its act together while smaller states took days and even weeks to finalize their votes, and the vote is still currently ongoing? Because Florida let counties start counting early votes and mail ballots 22 days before So today we are going to examine how these election lawsuits work. Do any of the Trump campaign lawsuits the lawsuits going to change the outcome of the election? sue anyone for anything at any time for any reason. But those claims need to have a legal basis, and eventually you'll need to provide. Now, maybe I am all of these lawsuits, whether they have merit or not. There are a lot of people who have doubts about the 2020 election, whether those doubts are well-founded or not. So it's important for those doubts to be tested. That's how we have confidence in the whole election process in general. The courts have mechanisms for dealing with both meritorious claims and frivolous claims. And if the claims are frivolous, then they will be thrown out. And if they have merit, then the courts will fashion a remedy. And I think that if the shoe was on the other foot, that it was clear that the Trump campaign had won the election, Democrats would want to know if there was foul play involved or not. And that's what the system is designed to do. But as it happens, Joe Biden is the putative president-elect, and it appears that Donald Trump is going to be a one-term president, which means that the balance of the lawsuits are going to come from the Trump campaign in an attempt to, if not outright change the outcome of the election, then at least take a deeper dive and, let's say, graciously make sure that everything was on the up and up. Now, before we dig into these different state lawsuits, it's important to recognize that every state has different laws.
Ooh, that hurt.
Law that say as long as the ballot is posted, it will be accepted. So there's no overarching federal law. Every state has a different law, and sometimes these laws are contradictory. So it's a complete patchwork of laws throughout the country. Now, not all of these election lawsuits are in fact, these lawsuits so far have fallen into one fraud, and then two are claims of poll watchers not being able to adequately observe the process itself. The fraud claims have so far generated some traction. We'll start relatively chronologically, starting with some of the suits that have already been bounced, and then we'll end with the most consequential lawsuit that may in fact I will summarize what effect these lawsuits are likely to have on the outcome of the 2020 election. But we'll start with Georgia, where the challenge is. Now, you would think that if you were trying to dispute an election, trying to disavow those on November 4th, the Trump campaign filed a lawsuit alleging that Chatham County, Georgia, was accepting absentee ballots after the state's statutory deadline. This would make those ballots invalid, which means that they wouldn't count, obviously. This lawsuit challenged the way that Chatham County was applying the law to absentee ballots. Under that law, after 7 p.m. on election day, kept unopened and transferred to storage, where they will eventually be destroyed. The Trump campaign provided an affidavit from someone claiming to be a poll watcher, who claimed that group of ballots to be processed. The poll watcher claims that those 53 ballots arrived after the deadline. However, the poll watcher offered no actual proof of this allegation and wasn't present when the ballots were processed. Chatham County is home to Savannah, an area where there are more Democrats than Republicans. And after a 1-hour hearing, the reporter explained now, there will probably be examining the kinds of errors that made these ballots defective. But as you can see, this will entail a close reading of the state election laws and a determination about which ballots are valid. This might change the final vote could be challenged due to problems with ballots. But you might, however, voters are already curing defects in some of these ballots. So where the actual vote tally is going to end up in terms of more votes for Trump or fewer votes for Trump is anyone's guess. And it's possible that the Trump campaign might file lawsuits challenging the state's process for curing ballots, but those cases seem unlikely or have So we move on to Michigan, where there was a lawsuit about poll observers. Now, Joe Biden is the projected winner in Michigan, and on November 4th, the Trump campaign and Republican self-appointed poll challengers Ostergren sued Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson in the Michigan Court of Claims. The lawsuit claims that Ostergren was excluded from watching the absentee ballot counting board, and that the state had violated the Michigan Constitution and Michigan election law by processing ballots without allowing poll watchers to see footage of ballots.
Unbiased. There gone through they will never experience. I chose to do the right thing. My character is still on trial.
Monday night centralized CBS. Now, some characters wanted to stop the counting of absentee ballots until the election inspector from each party was present. And until video was made available for ballot ballots. And two, immediately set aside all ballots that were not being, quote, inspected and monitored as described. Ostergren's claim
Whoa.
identify which board or which official was on the board. This means that he didn't sue the proper defendant, and his claim failed at step one, which is stating a claim for legal relief. But the lawsuit did include affidavits from poll watchers alleging that they had heard people talking about fraud. For example, poll watcher Jessica Cornyn said that she had heard other poll workers say that they could change the name of the ballot computer. And when you're asking for extraordinary relief, like what a lot of these generally strong evidence, here that evidence just wasn't there. There was no verification of facts through evidence, and a lot of the evidence was not admissible. The case was dismissed by Michigan State Court on November 6th. It's one of the few cases where hearsay evidence was not admitted, and rightfully so. We have examples of this evidence was not admitted. The judge found that, quote, the assertion that the affidavit was performed by an unknown individual, but, quote, is inadmissible hearsay within hearsay. Plaintiffs have provided no hearsay exception for either level of hearsay. A lot of these cases saw TROs or PIs, temporary restraining orders or preliminary injunctions, which is basically an early warning while the rest of the case can be litigated. Now, we talk a lot on this channel about how you often don't need to provide evidence. TRO or PI, you do have to provide evidence. You'll often hear about this. But at this TRO or PI stage, a court will often test that evidence. So, you're seeing the court cases, it's because the cases are asking for a TRO, which makes it representatives of both parties examined all ballots. They also requested that all ballots be unsealed and prepared for inspection, and that they be permitted to take depositions of local officials. A judge denied their application for injunction. Now, appears to allow the local city clerks to appoint Democratic and Republican inspectors who can observe the counting process. In dispute, the judge found Republican and Democratic inspectors were counting organizations. The court said the plaintiffs failed to even state a cause of action, simply asserting widespread fraud for decision. The court stated that hundreds or thousands of ballots have been impacted by this improper practice. Plaintiff's supplemental motion fails to present any further specifics. In short, the motion is anyone who watches The Simpsons knows we've got plenty of hearsay and conjecture. Those are kinds of evidence. They're just not allowed in court. So this lawsuit seemed to follow the general pattern established in the Michigan lawsuits where the Trump campaign was making these claims about fraud without any particularized evidence, claiming that Republicans had been denied shows that in fact they were present, there were partial issues. And the thing about these poll observer lawsuits is that even suspect, but even taking it at face value, if that were true, it's unlikely that any judge would invalidate the election, because just because observers weren't there or were too far away doesn't mean that anything untoward was happening. So without evidence of actual widespread ballot fraud, it's unlikely. Things like their feeling and a transcript of the case and the evidence. A big firm associate would be fired for making these kinds of mistakes, so that money would be implication the kinds of quality legal representations responsible for the Michigan cases. So that takes us to the great great state of Nevada. Now, in Nevada, Republicans filed a single federal lawsuit lumping several claims together. The alleged irregularities included what the complaint described as lax procedures for authenticating mailed ballots and claiming that more than 3,000 ineligible voters have cast a ballot. One plaintiff is Jill Stoke, a registered voter who said that on election day she went to vote in person but was told that her ballot had already been received by election officials and her signature was already verified. Election officials met with her and said that the signature on her ballot matched the signature. Stoke disputed that it was her ballot, but she gave Stoke the option to challenge her verified mail-in ballot and cast a provisional ballot instead. But she refused to cast a provisional ballot. The Nevada Secretary of State investigated her claim on November 3rd. Stoke told them that a person taken from her home had probably stolen the ballot, but she didn't want to name that person and subject them to criminal charges. A Nevada election official tried to persuade Stoke to name the person, make a formal statement, and vote by provisional ballot, but she refused. The Nevada official also told Stoke that if she cast another ballot, she would have double voted, which is a crime. Stoke then contacted the Trump campaign and media. Now, it seems that Stoke's polls on November 3rd, but documents from Savine States show that she talked to local officials about stolen ballot on. The allegations are particularly egregious because her lawsuit declaration did not star. A federal judge held a 2-hour hearing to assess her claims and found them to be lacking. He also warned Stoke's lawyer that she might have committed perjury. The judge also noted that the remedy that Stoke sought, an immediate halt to counting all votes, bore her no relationship to her legal claims. The lawsuit also alleged that the automated signature verification machine operates below the specification, and that use of the machine violates the requirements of the state election law. The Trump campaign already raised this same claim in a separate lawsuit, which was dismissed a week before the election. In this complaint, the plaintiffs claim that the use of the machine is impermissible under the Nevada Election Code and therefore violates the Elections Clause of the U.S. Constitution, and that Clark County's use of the machine constitutes a protection violation. But there doesn't appear to be much merit in these claims. Nevada law authorizes counties to adopt procedures that include the processing and counting of mail ballots by electronic means. Clark County registers the machine to increase the efficiency with which ballots were processed. And the machine makes the first pass on the sorting of ballots to ensure the signature on the ballot matches the signature of the registration. But if the machine flags a ballot for a mismatch, then a person then reviews the ballot. The plaintiffs allege that the process is faulty because the machine does the initial pass rather than the person. However, Clark County's process appears to comply with Nevada law. Before a ballot can be rejected, at least 2 employees in the office of the clerk must agree that there is a reasonable question of fact as to whether the signature used for the mailed ballot matches the signature of the voter. Here, the machine does not make the final decision about whether a ballot will be rejected or not. A federal judge dismissed the claim, stating that Nevada law allows for the use of machines in tabulating votes and doesn't specifically forbid signature comparison devices. The lawsuit also includes a poll observer component. Here, a man named Chris Prudhomme, who the lawsuit describes as a potential member of the media, also sued Clark County officials. However, it appears that Prudhomme is actually a senior advisor to the state Republican Party. And Prudhomme says that officials didn't let him observe ballot voting, which arrived at 12:45 a.m. The county officials said the counting was over for the evening. Prudhomme's declaration, which is the evidence submitted to the court in support of the claim, says that he was then improperly told to leave the area. Well, Prudhomme alleges that he was blocked from observing the counting. Clark County Attorney Mary Ann Miller testified to this action. Prudhomme also says that he
Oh shit!
Against counting ballots, quote, the counting procedure must be public. At oral argument, the judge said, "You're asking me to impose some new standard or strictures or guidelines. Do we have to provide microphones? At what point does it get into the ridiculous?" Of course, Nevada law does allow people to have meaningful public access to vote counting. Here, the judge essentially ruled that the counting procedure was public and observable. And in Nevada, a lot of these claims of fraud are already evaporating. People were claiming that there were votes associated with dead people. It appears that most of these are probably related to service members who since moved after voting, which so that takes us to Pennsylvania, which is election lawsuits. much smaller scale than Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is sort of the equivalent of 2000 Florida in this particular election. And on top of that, the lawsuits in Florida have already gotten the attention of the U.S. Supreme Court. So let's look at the different facets of these election lawsuits. The first concerns late arriving ballots. The most high-profile after the state's deadline for getting ballots is also the case began when the Pennsylvania Democratic Party filed a lawsuit to challenge parts of the state's absentee ballot system in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is long before the actual election. Relying on a provision in the state's constitution, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court extended the deadline for mail-in ballots until November 6th. As it stands now, ballots that are clearly postmarked after the election would not be counted under the Pennsylvania court's ruling. Ballots postmarked on or before Election Day, and ballots with no postmark would be counted in However, Republicans objected to November 6th to the final 7 days in federal court. On September 28th, Republican legislators and the Pennsylvania Republican Party asked the Supreme Court to put the Pennsylvania court's ruling on hold. The U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear the case. Four justices explicitly left the Republicans reconsidering the vote. But the Supreme Court left the door open, saying to segregate the ballots that were postmarked on or before the postmarked before and on October 28, 2020, Kelly Bookbar, Secretary of the Commonwealth, issued a memorandum to that effect, requiring all counties to sequester those late arriving ballots, which would then be counted after all the other votes were processed. Now, just because they were counted didn't mean necessarily that they would eventually be added to the total vote count in Pennsylvania. That was still up in the air. But 3 days after the election on November 6th, the Trump campaign moved to intervene as a plaintiff in the case. The Trump campaign asked the Supreme Court, seeking an emergency order that all the ballots be sequestered and not counted. The Trump campaign alleged that it did not know whether all counties were following the procedures set forth in the court's memo. Now, most emergency applications of public significance are addressed by the Supreme Court, although particularly urgent matters are justices later in. Here, Justice Alito chose to do exactly that thing to his colleagues for further action. And in the meantime, he issued an order requiring that the ballots be sequestered, which, again, at least if all the counties were following the order of the Secretary of the Commonwealth, they already were. But Alito also rejected some counties were not appropriately sequestering the ballots, saying, quote, there is no evidence that any county is disobeying the guidance to engage these votes. And the Republican Party offers only speculation that certain unidentified counties may be more than the Secretary will after Election Day. The exact number of these ballots is unknown. However, the impact of the decision will almost certainly not be decisive. Pennsylvania counties have been sequestering the late arriving ballots and will count the last. They're probably they even favor the president, which is an open question. So that takes us to the Pennsylvania cases challenging the ballot cure process. There are still more cases. The cure process was mandated by the American Vote Act of 2002, or HAVA. The federal law requires states to allow voters to cure potential errors when there's an uncertainty about the absence of required identification or other issues. The election official is required to offer the voter a provisional ballot instead of a regular ballot. If a voter votes in person, they can ask for a provisional ballot or they can Since so many voters used a mailed-in ballot this year, several states have created a process for these voters to fix certain errors in mailed ballots, like a missing or mismatched voter signature. Once a provisional ballot is cast, it's stored separately from the other ballots and investigated by local election officials. Generally, a poll worker will have to verify to cure those different ballots. And each state has its own deadline for voters who need to cure carry their ballots. Here, Republicans are raising criticisms of the state's processes for carrying ballots. So, the Trump campaign and the Republican National Committee have now talked about claiming that she improperly extended the deadline for absentee and mail-in votes to provide any missing proof of identification from November 9th to November 12th. This is a challenge to the state's cure process for absentee ballots. The Republicans contend that it's wrong for the state to give voters a few extra days to cure deficiencies. A judge ordered both parties to segregate mailed-in ballots from voters providing November 10th and November 12th, saying that she would rule later on the validity of this deadline extension. And it's unlikely that the cured ballot issue will determine the result in Pennsylvania's Again, we're talking about a pretty small number of ballots here, and it's going to be a relatively easy decision to see whether the court approves of the deadline extension or not. Notifying voters and helping them to cure defective votes. Plaintiffs withdrew their request for an emergency order. The judge said the case failed to state a viable claim. The bottom line in this case is that the voters had the right to cure their ballots, provided that they follow state requirements, and the plaintiffs couldn't come up with a way that the cure process was violating the law in Montgomery County. Which takes us finally to the poll observer lawsuits in Pennsylvania, which are not dissimilar from some of the other poll observer lawsuits that we saw, though some of the outcomes of these cases show what happens when you piss off a federal judge. In the first case, the Trump campaign continued to file cases claiming that there were deficiencies in how poll observers were treated. The campaign successfully sued Philadelphia on Election Day, asserting that its poll watchers weren't being given, quote, reasonable access to monitor the counting of votes in Philadelphia because they were kept at too far a distance from the process. The suit was dismissed by a Philadelphia trial court, but an appellate court reversed, ordering officials to allow all poll observers to watch the ballot counting. Which, frankly, seems like a win for all of us. We need both partisan and neutral observers to make sure that the election process is working as it should, and there's no foul play, so that we can all have confidence that the democratic process was working. The only thing unusual is that they were seeking to invalidate the ballots, but as far as I can tell, no court has ever thrown out ballots because poll watchers were sitting too far away. Which finally takes us to the last election lawsuit in Pennsylvania, where the Trump campaign filed an emergency request in the federal court for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania to stop the Philadelphia so long as observers are not present and required by state law. And here the plaintiffs ran into a harassment federal judge who simply wasn't having allegations with no factual basis. Here, federal judge Diamond asks, "Are your observers in the counting room?" To which the Trump campaign replied in a oral argument, "There is a non-zero number of people in the room." To which Judge Diamond responded, "I'm asking you as a member of the bar of this court, are people representing the Donald J. Trump for president, representing the plaintiffs, in that room?" To which the Trump campaign lawyer responded, "Yes." And Diamond said, "I'm sorry, then what's your problem?" So here's the thing. When a federal judge asks you to respond as a member of this court, what he or she is signaling to you is that you had better not lie, because the judge is a violation. And you might be referred to bar counsel and the judge. Now, although the Trump campaign continues to assert in public that the counting process is happening in secret without any Republicans present, when they're in court in front of the judge, that's not what they're saying. It appears because that's just not true. The parties in the case agreed after Judge Diamond ballots were being counted. The judge agreed that observers were allowed, but not at a certain distance, only at away. So this means that there are 120 people watching all the votes being counted in Philadelphia. The city also has 5 You can actually find this out watching putting ballots in the machine. So while the case settlement might be considered a win for the Trump campaign, really it's a And finally, there was a practical lawsuit in Pennsylvania They claim that mail-in voting is unconstitutional and claims that mail-in ballots were non-signature verified. It also rehashes the any of the states to change the results, let alone change the results in several of the states. And at the time of this recording, it looks like Joe Biden is going to win 6 electoral votes. In the year 2000, down to a single state, there were only 500 votes separating the two candidates. A single could decide the outcome of a huge state with lots of electoral votes. Here, there are just too many states. And of course, there are reports very unhappy with his legal team. It seems to be run by Jared Kushner. Man, is there anything that kid can't do? And also that it can not happy with his legal representation. And there doesn't seem to be any real coordinated legal strategy that's going to change the outcome of the entire 2020 election. Maggie Haberman of the New York Times put it, this is a media and not for nothing, the Trump campaign's claims outside of the court are very different from the claims they are making in court, because often you have to make these claims on perjury, and the lawyers themselves have certain ethical bounds, and also there are putting things before the court that have a lack of complete basis. And none of these lawsuits are likely to change the outcome of the election. The Trump campaign would have to file and win lawsuits concerning far more ballots than he's litigating now. And none of these lawsuits would be able to overturn the disparity in the various states. And the same goes for recounts. Now, some states require the objector to pay for the recount. So we'll see if the Trump campaign actually that has ever changed the results by more than 1/10%. And the Trump campaign would need to win lawsuits in multiple states to swing electoral votes. A minimum of 3 states. That's or more likely an idiot wearing a weird barbecue freedom shirt trying to interfere with the poor election officials trying to do their job. Feel free to call the police. And the best way to make that call is with Ting Mobile. Ting provides great LTE 5G coverage because it partners with the biggest carrier, so you get the benefit of 3 massive networks. With Ting, you're only paying the actual use every month. So on average, Ting customers pay just $23 per month per device. And with Ting, you can use almost any telephone. Now, there's no contract, overage fees, or any other carrier tricks. You just pay a fair price for the talk, text, and data that you use at the end. Because they don't have any brick-and-mortar stores, they pour all of their resources into their phone and online support. If you have any issues, you can just give them a call and you'll talk to a real human being. With Ting, especially if you're around Wi-Fi all the time, which, I mean, most of us are, we're all working from home, you'll end up paying way less than you do now. Of course, some people should pay $200 a month for unlimited data because they're nowhere near their home Wi-Fi. Hundreds of dollars. And Ting gives you the option to only pay for what you use. So, if you go to legaleagle.ting.com, you can use your last bill to compare just how much you would save. And Legal Eagles will get a $25 credit by going to legaleagle.ting.com, and that could cover your entire first month of service. If there's no contracts, you can try it for a month, no strings attached. Again, all you have to do is click the link in the description or go to legaleagle.com and get a $25 credit for whatever service you want. Plus, clicking on that link really helps out this channel. So, do you agree with my analysis? Leave your objections in the comments and check out this and I'll see you. Chromebooks are a good way to laptop, starting with the everything button, so you can find anything the moment you need it, from files to apps to answers online, instantly. And Chromebooks are secure, with virus protection that's built in. So no more of this, and a lot more peace of mind. Easy and secure, don't just switch to switch to a new way to laptop. Switch to Chromebook. Hello and welcome to ABC Live. We're here for the first Trust News very trusted publication of her explosive new memoir, Too Much and Never Enough. This exclusive interview about
thinking about my family, it applies because people associate money with them, understandably. And for my grandfather in particular, there was no such thing as having money. Thinking about what that meant, and also thinking about the psychology children. That Donald and Len, his siblings, and when really carefully examining the kind of childhoods they had, particularly Donald and my father, there was this very real sense for Donald when he was quite young that there just wasn't enough love, attention. And for my father, who was quite a bit older, there was too much attention. You know, he was my grandfather focused on him, was extraordinarily hard on him. So because there was such an odd degree of difference in terms of what the children perceived, there would never be enough to compensate for the loss of what he experienced as a child. And for my father, there was always too much of the loss. That impacted everybody in the family.
All begins with your grandfather.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
You say he's a sociopath.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
He had no empathy. He was incredibly driven in a way that turned other people, including his children, his wife, into pawns to be used to his own ends. If somebody could be of service to him, then he would use them. If they couldn't be, he excised them. And in my father's case, seriously, he was not and my grandmother essentially needed to get rid of him.
You say your grandfather destroyed both your father because he wasn't the person your grandfather wanted him to be. Donald Trump is president of the United States, yet you say your grandfather destroyed him as well.
Yeah. He went about it differently. Because, unfortunately for Donald, he could be of use to my grandfather. It wasn't as simple as that. Not being accepted. And it's impossible to know who Donald might have been under different circumstances with different parents. But clearly he learned the lesson from watching his almost 8-year-old brother be punished for being kind, for being generous, for being sensitive, for having interests outside of what my grandfather thought was acceptable. You know, he loved to hang out with his friends. He loved to boat and fish and fly. By the time he graduated from college, he had his private and his professional life. He was not a killer. And shockingly, that was a bad thing. And Donald learned that lesson. And he essentially had to sacrifice whatever capacities for emotion to my grandfather. And on the surface of things, yes, he's really successful. However you want to in material terms and in terms he learned to become the killer you mentioned, the man who needs to succeed in all to win. Everything goes to look at what he claims to be.
Yay!
And I don't know that most people in my family understand that.
You paint a picture of a family that is, I guess, malignantly dysfunctional. How so?
Your style is an art. With a little inspiration and grateful, you can create a new and innovation.
Very early on, separated, they were never able really to count on each other in ways that mattered. They were in competition with each other for resources that felt over time
No!
yeah, his mother not so much. Yeah. She was in some ways very much a creature of that generation. The gender divide in my family was stark even for the 40s and 50s. She had very little to do with the boys. It was almost as if the boys were my grandfather's purview and the girls were hers. I think from quite early on, Donald just didn't expect much from her. He knew, I think by the time he returned, going better for him. And after that very tragic year when she was quite ill, I don't think
you described her as being almost at her wit's end with Donald before he sent to the military academy.
Yeah.
How so?
I believe that for 6 months, and after that, I don't believe that she was attended to properly. Her physical well-being was perhaps addressed, but her psychological well-being was not. And for whatever reason, she was not able to repair what that absence had wrought. As he grew older, I think that he just didn't know how to relate to her. And what I'm sure he experienced as an excommunication. TWA and the dawn of the Jet Age, I, much to my shame, didn't understand what he accomplished. I was often ashamed of him, not realizing that he had no support in the family and was treated as somebody who was damaged beyond repair and wasn't worth investing in any way, emotionally or otherwise.
You're right. Donald fought the lead of my grandfather, and with the complicity, silence, and inaction of his siblings, destroyed my father.
Yeah, that was hard to write. Much harder to witness. Partially because my dad, at his best, which unfortunately was in the 60s, the early 60s.
Cause everybody got the gift list. The whole squad looking fly in the houses. It's the coziest place that's been ever existed.
Shop cozy styles for everyone on your list. Me Holiday, only at Old Navy and OldNavy.com.
Not that it matters, but he was an extraordinarily handsome man. But he was also charming, but in a deep way, kind, generous, fiercely loyal, and beloved. I've been in touch with his friends who haven't seen him since college or even before that, and they remember him as the most wonderful human being they ever met. They remember the wonderful times they had together. You know, he would put them in his Cessna and fly them to Bimini for the weekend to go fishing or out east to Montauk. And it's extraordinary to hear almost 50 years later, 60 years later, what an indelible impression they made upon him and how fondly they still remember him.
You say that was a hard sentence to write. I left out the next sentence.
Okay.
Which is?
I'm sorry.
I can't let him destroy my country.
Yes. Yeah, I should remember that. That sounds pretty arrogant, so let me explain what I mean. I feel, as I write in the book, that there are so many parallels between the circumstances in which my family operated and in which this country is now operating. I saw firsthand what focusing on the wrong things, elevating the wrong people can do. You know, the collateral damage that can be created by allowing somebody to live their lives without accountability. And it is striking to see that continuing now on a much grander scale. And what I was getting at there is that if I can do anything to change the narrative and to tell the truth, I need to do that. Because I don't believe the American people had the entire truth 4 years ago.
Why didn't you write the book 4 years ago?
I thought long and hard about saying something. I know a book wasn't in my head at that time. And honestly, it took me a while to take it seriously, to take the election, his part in it seriously. So even if I thought of writing a book, there wouldn't have been time. But I did think of speaking out, knowing that it would have been quite risky to do. And then I realized there literally was nothing I could say at the time. Nothing stuck. You know, he insulted a Gold Star family. He called upon people at the Republican National Convention to come up with a Second Amendment defense against Hillary Clinton. And then, you know, by the time the Access Hollywood tape rolled around, I knew that if I had said anything, I would have been hated as a disgruntled, disinherited niece.
who
just wanted for 15 minutes, which obviously is still being said about me now, but it wouldn't have made it.
That's exactly what the White House says. It's a book of falsehoods. You already have financial self-interest. Basically, you're lying for money.
It makes perfect sense that they would say that. Projection is a powerful thing. But if I had wanted money or revenge, I would have done this 10 years ago when it was infinitely safer. And he was still a very public figure. But neither one of those things interested me. I was living my life. I was beyond, well beyond what had happened 20 years ago with my family. And it would have served no purpose other than getting revenge or maybe making some money.
And what do you think people say? America knew exactly what they were doing when they elected Donald Trump. He's kind of an open book. What don't they know?
Yeah, I don't think that's at all true. Because outside of New York, I don't think people really quite understood the truth behind his business record and his financial failures, which are legion and serial. Beyond that, there was such a complex election. There was so much going on that I don't think the choices that people had to make were necessarily based on an honest appraisal. There was so much interference from so many different sources. And the other thing that I think is really important to realize, and that I certainly didn't realize before 2016, was just how enabled he would be. Which maybe I should have seen coming.
Well, it's one of the things you write about. You say that basically he was enabled, institutionalized is your word, his whole life. What do you mean by that?
As I say, there's a through line from the House to Trump Management, which was my grandfather's company in Brooklyn, to the Trump Organization, which my grandfather helped Donald Trump in Manhattan, to the White House. And those are all situations and circumstances in which Donald has always been protected and continues to be protected from his inadequacies, from his incompetence, from his lack of knowledge, from his failures. And he's always had support of more powerful people. He's always had people protecting him from his mistakes or from people who would try to hold him account. And he's always been amply financed. So, as I also write, how do we gauge this man's ability to function in the real world as he's never really had to? And that, to me, is quite terrifying.
You're a trained clinical psychologist.
Yes.
You come to the conclusion he's a narcissist.
Yeah, I explicitly avoid diagnosing him.
I was going to ask you, do you have any qualms as a psychologist laying out the possible things that he could be suffering from?
No, I think it's useful, especially since so many other people have done it, and I thought it was important to address that, since it has been such an important issue, especially given the Goldwater rule versus the duty to warn that psychologists and psychiatrists have been grappling with. So I wanted to address all of that without explicitly saying, this is his diagnosis. He is not my patient. He's never been my patient. I do, however, have access to information about him that nobody else has had. So it was a lot easier for me to put the diagnoses that are out there in context of his developmental history.
Boil it down. What's the single most important thing you think the country needs to know about your...
What's your scent for the holidays?
It's Christmas. Oh, yeah.
Please, limited edition holiday collection at C. Johnson.
Your uncle.
He's utterly incapable of leading this country. And it's dangerous to allow him to do so.
Based on What you see now, or what you saw then?
Based on what I've seen my entire adult life.
Talk about the relationship between your father and his younger brother.
My dad was very patient with Donald.
He's about 8 years older?
About 7.5, 8 now. So it's a very big gap. You know, they were practically different generations. They didn't have the same, they didn't travel in the same circles. But my dad, when they were younger, included him when he could, you know, especially when Donald was sort of at loose ends, when he was at Fordham and living at the house and didn't have a lot of friends, and Dad wouldn't ask his friends to invite him to dinner parties or take him out on the boat with his fraternity brothers fishing. Donald was much younger. But I don't believe that they weren't close. And I think as soon as it became clear my father was not going to be able to continue in Trump management, and this would have been in the early 60s, I think Donald saw an opening. And I want to make something clear. This is very important to me. It's not that my dad wasn't good at it or had no interest in succeeding my grandfather in his company. He had every intention of being the next in line and working hard to make sure that he was successful in his father's business. My grandfather didn't give him a chance and made it impossible for my dad to succeed. And he was so miserable that he finally realized that, you know, he wasn't going to be given responsibility, he wasn't going to be given respect, so why stay? And that's when he opted to apply to MUA, which he did, and who accepted him right off the bat, and moved him to Boston, flew the Logan LAX route, which was a big deal at the time. But because that was considered a betrayal, it didn't last.
Betrayal by your grandfather. President Trump wasn't a fan of it either. He says now, and he has said for the last couple of years, that he regrets the pressure he put on your father.
Sure. But he was also following that script. So Donald he just graduated from high school. So I can't fault him necessarily for doing what his father asked him to do. It was terrible to have put him in that position. Certainly. What isn't okay is the revisionist history. You know, that Freddie was bad at it, and you know, we should have let him, as if Donald had any power over what my dad did. We should have let him do what he wanted to do. Which again, at the time, they considered being a glorified bus driver. And also the way my dad is presented, I don't know that I've ever heard Donald talk about my dad as a pilot, as a member of the Air Force National Guard, or any of that. It's more as somebody who couldn't hack it in the family and lost his way. Yeah, that's one of our favorite family stories. They were really young kids, and I think Donald was maybe 7. And one of his favorite things to do was torment my Uncle Rob, who was a couple of years younger. It was, you know, my grandmother was cooking dinner and getting the table ready, and Donald was just being merciless, and Marianne and my dad could not get him to stop. And finally, my dad had no other option but to pick up a bowl of potatoes, mashed potatoes, and just dump it on his little brother's head. And it ended
it ended the fight, but I think it also started something because Donald was humiliated by it, as evidenced by the way he reacts to the story now. There's no sense of humor about it whatsoever.
It came up when you were at the White House in April 2017?
Yes. Yes.
Who brought it up?
My Aunt Marianne. Yeah, and we know that he doesn't like the story, so I think it was a bit of a dig. It's also a way to remember my dad in a way that's not charged. Because all of us except Donald think it's funny and sweet, but he doesn't like that story.
Election night 2016, I think you tweeted out, "This worst night of my life."
One of them, yeah.
One of the worst nights of my life. Then why go to the White House in April 2017?
Families are very complicated. I had been on the outside of this family, and it I was invited to. My Aunt Marianne and I started talking, and we developed a relationship which we'd never had before, quite honestly. And it mattered to me, you know. It was the first time I felt part of the family since I was a kid. And somehow it was very easy for me to put aside all of the things that had happened previous to that. And I enjoyed her company. She's funny, she's smart. And it just, when I got invited to her birthday party, I felt that I should go.
This is a hard question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Reading the book.
I didn't write it. Or anything like that. In fact, I would have preferred not to write it. It was quite difficult. And I sometimes feel I would have been better for not knowing some of the things I now know. Yeah, the family dysfunction. You know, possibly my generation was less affected than my father's. But we've been affected, and I'm not going to speak for anybody else in my generation. But it hasn't been easy, and it's an interesting question, and I think you're right. It is in part.
Your brother's not happy with the book.
Your style is an art. With a little inspiration and the right tools, you can create anything you imagine. Celebrating 30 years of inspiration and innovation. Hot Tools, just imagine the style.
I believe that my brother is entitled to his privacy and his opinion, and I am completely supportive of whatever relationship he has with my family and whatever choices he makes. It's none of my business. This is in my family. Nobody knew what was happening. You know, I didn't feel that I needed to ask for I didn't hit anybody. You know, this is my responsibility, and I respect them. I've been told this by people in my family. I also know that it was not the Joe Shapiro who just happened
I stand by it. Absolutely. To be clear, it's not Pam Shriver. Pam Shriver, the widow of Joe Shapiro, has come up publicly and said, he didn't beat Donald Trump into a pen. There's no way this is true. Yes, and I feel terrible that she's been subjected to this. Honestly, I wish I could have said something sooner, but obviously I couldn't. I'm happy to now, and I absolutely stand by the story, and I think the only people other than me who can address it are other people in my family, and I look forward to hearing their response to that question. How do you know it's true? I trust my sources. Is Joe Shapiro still alive? That I don't know. I have no idea. Have you ever met Joe Shapiro? I have not. So you believe in your sources. How do your sources know? They were alive at the time, so they and you believe also? Yes. And Donald Trump knows it's true? Yes. What the White House and Donald Can I prove? No, because I'm told me this story. So in terms of documentation, no, I can't prove it, but I can certainly say with 100% certainty that I was told this story by a source very close to us now. You do write that he once had a spark of kindness. Yeah, I think he did. The evidence for it is slim. And what's, in all seriousness, what's tragic about it to me is that I think he had those impulses, but they'd been so perverted by my grandfather. They'd been so perverted by the example my grandfather had made of my father that he didn't quite know how to do it. So when Donald was trying genuinely to be kind, and I'm not talking about the superficial charm he uses quite effectively to draw people in initially. I'm talking about really wanting to connect or be there in some way. He just can't do it. Or he couldn't. Honestly, I don't think that's even an issue anymore. We're talking about decades. And I believe, and I read it, one of the unforgivable things my grandfather did to Donald was he severely restricted the range of communication that was sadness. Well, kindness isn't a feeling. So feelings, and for the boys, I'm speaking of the boys now, particularly Donald and my dad. Those things are superfluous, unmanly, a stupid waste of time is probably how people would put it. Or punished. Ruthlessly punished. And my dad couldn't change who he was. So he just was dismantled over time. Donald tried his very best not to be destroyed in the way my dad was destroyed. So he ended up with a very narrow range in which he could safely operate as a human being. And it's made it extraordinarily difficult for him to live in the world. And as I said earlier, he's never
distressed. We're legitimately sad. We're legitimately in pain. And to be prevented from being able to feel those feelings, honestly and openly, is a form of torture. You know, my grandmother assaulted and broke bones 4 times than I can count because of her osteoporosis. Was in agony much of the time. You know, she told me was extraordinarily painful for her. And my grandfather could not and the only people who suffered from that were the people who were actually in pain. You know, first my grandmother, then my dad, and then anybody else in the family who showed me. Got very successful, you know. Yeah, that was, that's the kind of experience that's shaped as much by what happened after. And one of it, I remember that conversation verbatim. It was so, given what I now know was the truth while I was having that conversation, I will never forget it. Fuck. I didn't know why. My mother was also with my grandparents in that event. And when my grandfather got on the phone, he said, your dad's sick. Is it serious? It's in the hospital, but it's not serious. Okay. You know, why am I calling you at 7 o'clock on a Saturday night if it's not serious? I was thinking to myself. So it's yes, it's serious, but don't worry about it. And when I get out now, 2 minutes later, my mother reminded what was going on. My father had died 2 months ago. Obviously, this is a strange no family. You were his brother. Yeah, that shocked me when I heard about it. You know, it was bad enough. It was probably worse, honestly, that my dad's parents had the library in the house waiting for a phone call. I was their son literally died. So maybe it isn't surprising that Donald is around waiting for phone calls to murder But, you know, I really wonder that it was more compelling than that it was his dying brother. But I'll never know. But yeah. French
That's where the problems come. And
Oh, fuck.
have enough information to understand in what way at the time, you know, that was not ago, and I was so a lot of people cracked up. But I was she let us know. So that was much more important to me than the other side of it. And it certainly made the dealing with the money issues harder because.
But it was all about the money, wasn't it?
I'm a Trump. Yeah, I everything's about money in this family. But I'm also different from them. And for me, what I understood, and one of the reasons it was so devastating, was that money stood in for everything else. It was literally the only currency the family trafficked in. So I knew that it was also about love. And to be disinherited, to be shut out entirely from the wealth of the family was to be told quite explicitly that you don't have any money.
Part of the settlement was a non-disclosure agreement. Why do you feel today that it's not necessary to abide by that?
There are a few reasons.
Fuck!
Human beings and attorneys. But the technical stuff aside, I didn't feel that the NDA mattered one way or the other because what I have to say is too important. And whether I had to publish this book on my own or suffer the consequences of a court battle, I didn't care.
2017, a few months after your aunt's birthday at the White House, you started to call us friends. Describe that.
Actually, it started with a knock on my door. So there was no easing it with phone calls. Suzanne Craig, investigative reporter extraordinaire, knocked on my door, I believe it was June of 2017, and told me that they were trying to rewrite the history of my family's finances, and she believed that I could help them.
Did she know, or was she
would be happy to lighten your load.
I don't know, actually.
When the skulls came,
either way,
when I came to, I wish I could
on,
do
but I didn't know. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't remember that I had anything in my possession that could put as far behind me as I could.
If only something could be done for her.
I said to her,
Best of luck to you.
I'm sorry, I don't speak to reporters.
but I took her business card anyway. And then she started writing letters all the vacation.
May I ask if would you mind
And it wasn't until I got
Thank you.
trapped in my house because I fractured my fifth metatarsal and was completely stuck on the couch for about 4 months that I started thinking about her letters, which seemed increasingly compelling, and called her.
What was the pitch?
The pitch was that I had in my possession, because of the lawsuit, documents that they believed could help them uncover certain financial improprieties that my family, starting with my grandfather, had engaged in. And, you know, finally, I guess at some point, I thought, why not? You know, if I can help. I knew that my speaking out wasn't going to make a difference, certainly that. But if there's anything I can do to help, I did not like what was happening in the country. It didn't bother me less. Just the other, you know, the institutional memory, the degradations of institutions, from the Muslim ban on down to the kidnapping and incarceration of children at the border, it was unbearable. And it wasn't just Donald. It was, as I said earlier, the number of people willing to enable this. So I said, all right, and I went to the office of my then attorney, and it took a while. It didn't just happen in one day, but eventually I got 19 boxes full of documents, drove them to my house, and handed them over, and the rest is history. One of the, if not the most extraordinary piece of journalism I've ever seen in my life.
As a reporter, I can't imagine, or describe it, not whether I can imagine or not, their reaction when you brought them 19 boxes of tax documents.
We were really happy. It was, it was amazing. They were, we were ecstatic because it was real. I'm working on the story. But they didn't think
A year later, Pulitzer Prize, the story breaks, and it describes a few things. That Donald Trump's dad was far wealthier than people knew, far wealthier than you and your lawyers knew when the will was being fought over. That Donald Trump was far less wealthy than people knew but for his grandfather, and also raised the question that perhaps some of it was done in a way that could constitute tax fraud. What about that surprised you?
Honestly, none of that surprised me. What did surprise me was the lengths they allegedly went to. The formation of Old County, which from what I understand was simply a shell corporation designed to siphon money from my grandfather's very valuable and successful company, so that that money could sort of be disappeared, and the money left to be taxed was significantly less. So that amazed me.
Part of the reason you put up a bigger fight when
So 970 million.
Surprised at how little political impact those revelations seem to have.
I was.
when there's a reckoning, the sum total of what we've done is taken into account. It's not huge. It involves a universe. It's this horrible thing happens, and then this horrible thing happens, so we forget about the first horrible thing. So they just replace each other.
But for you, the political become personal, the personal become political.
Yes.
You're right, I had to take Donald down.
Yes. Maybe a bit of an overstatement there in the sense that I didn't ever think that there was any one thing I or anybody else could do. But certainly in that moment, I felt that I needed to do anything I could, not just to stop this, but also to make up for the fact that I hadn't done anything in the past. That weighed on me, even though I knew that it probably wouldn't have made a difference. If this almost 14,000 word article didn't have the kind of impact it should have had by all rights, then nothing I would have done necessarily would have mattered. But I definitely felt the responsibility. This country is on a precipice, and we have a decision to make in the future. Where we want to go as a country. It's hard for me to process and people need to know. People need as much information as is available. That makes sense. As a country, as Americans, citizens of the world. So,
The New York Times reviewed your book.
telling the truth is telling the stories as I remember them, as they were told to me, causes pain, then the people who participated in them need to look to themselves.
That's a Chromebook with the everything button. One button with the power to find things instantly. From files to apps, even answers online. Who says you can't have everything? With one little button. The everything button.
And I just remember thinking, he's tired. He seems like this is not what he signed up for, if he even knows what he signed up for. And I thought his response was actually more enlightening than they won't get me. And so far, looks like he's right.
And if you're in the Oval Office today, what would you say to him?
We're
version of it is now the members of that committee will have a chance to ask these questions to these two men privately. Already, we've heard from people like Mitt Romney, who's talked about the allegations being troubling in the extreme, is the word that he used. Ted Toomey, another Republican, saying that the presidential oath of office requires the President of the United States to do two things: faithfully execute his or her office and protect and defend the Constitution. That oath, of course, cannot be honored if the President does not first defend the country. If our national security is jeopardized, if our country is left undefended, the necessity to faithfully execute the office becomes moot. Where there is no country, there is no office to execute. And so the duty to defend the nation is foundational to the President's responsibilities. But what of his second responsibility? Is that really? The founders were not speaking, of course, of a piece of parchment. Rather, they were expressing the obligation of the President to defend our citizens, the balances that the Constitution enshrines, to defend the rule of law, a principle upon which the idea of America was born.
Well, now it looks like I have enough souls I can upgrade.
Yesterday, we were presented with the most graphic evidence yet that the President of the United States has betrayed his oath of office. Betrayed his oath to defend our national security, and betrayed his oath to defend our Constitution. For yesterday, we were presented with a record of a call between the President of the United States and the President of Ukraine, in which the President, our President, sacrificed our national security and our Constitution for his personal political benefit. To understand how he did so, we must first understand just how overwhelmingly dependent Ukraine is on the United States, militarily, financially, diplomatically, and in every other way. And not just on the United States, but on the person of the President. Ukraine was invaded by its neighbor, by our common adversary, by Vladimir Putin's Russia. It remains occupied by Russian irregular forces in a long simmering war. Ukraine desperately needs our help, and for years we have given it, and on a bipartisan basis. That is until 2 months ago, when it was held up inexplicably by President Trump. It is in this context, after a brief congratulatory call from President Trump to President Zelensky on April 21st, and after the President's personal emissary, Rudy Giuliani, made it abundantly clear to Ukrainian officials over several months that the President wanted dirt on his political opponent, it is in this context that the new President of Ukraine would speak to Donald Trump over the phone on July 25th. President Zelensky, eager to establish himself at home as a friend of the President of the most powerful nation on earth, had at least two objectives: get a meeting with the President and get more military help. And so what happened on that call? Zelensky begins by ingratiating himself, and he tries to enlist the support of the President. He expresses his interest in meeting with the President and says his country wants to acquire more weapons from us to defend itself. And what is the President's response?
come up to here and you get to see your character profile. You run up here. Up here. Run out and around. This person. This little guy on the ground.
And most of the world.
Hi everyone, and welcome to my 5 tips for beginners to Demon Souls. These are going to be things that will help guide you in your decision making and not really things that will make you successful in combat. All footage shown is from the original Demon Souls. There's the tutorials to both the footage and my commentary, things that you will see within your first 10 minutes of playing the game. That said and done, let's get into the tips. The first thing you guys need to know is that there is 2 forms that your character will take within the game: soul form and human form. Your character's natural form is human form. However, upon dying in human form, your character will go into soul form, and a portion of your HP will be unavailable until human form is regained, which can be achieved from either slaying a boss or using a semi-rare item. What is not immediately told to you is dying in human form also shifts a mechanic known as world tendency closer to black. This mechanic is very complex. However, the thing you need to know is dying in human form will make your game objectively more difficult. To avoid this, many players, once they slay a boss, will go back to the Nexus, the hub of the game, and climb the stairwell and then fall to their death in order to avoid being in human form at all outside of the Nexus. The next thing I want to talk about is observing your environment and making sure you're using the right equipment. The world of Demon Souls is full of traps that, if you become aware of them, can actually be used to your advantage. Along with this, items given to you in a specific area are generally given to you as a hint as to what you should be using in that area. And my last point here is to make sure you observe your enemies and use your common sense to infer their weaknesses. My third tip here is to make sure that you use the shortcuts and opportunities for you to return to the Nexus. It's very easy to become impatient and want to keep making progress in the world that you're in. However, you can take these opportunities to go back to the Nexus, spend your souls, and drop off items that you have received. Avoiding this can lead to you dying and losing a lot of your souls that you have been gathering, or you come across an item that you can't pick up because you're over encumbered. Now, there's no set progression route.
Poison replenishes MP, recovers their ability. Sticky white stuff, huh? Dude, I'm so happy with this game, man. You got them hands of God, son. What? Oh, I got hands of God! I don't have the faith for them. That's interesting. Once there was a mighty warrior who slaughtered dragons with his bare hands, true men would come to worship his bare fists, and legends spoke as this like it against the dragon boss. Yeah, let's see how this goes. Flamelurker was easy with magic, but I don't see that being so easy right now. Alright, let's go. Why am I going back? Why would I go back? Okay, why not? Death is all part of
Pigs upon a time. Car wrecks suck. End of story. You know, a while back, I got hurt in a car wreck, and it was just a terrible experience. Everyone loves that. That's one thing people clap, and you put some stuff in your pocket in the game, says you're recovered, and you mean that? Yay! Yes! More! Why doesn't this happen in more games? What do you guys want to do? You just want to be Vegas fans? It doesn't matter to me. I don't know what to do. You can take your clothes off at any point. Hey. I've never played this game. You guys, I think both of you have played. Like, I've only played a little bit. I played it 3 billion years ago because I didn't get a PS5. And I have to wait like a bastard. That's why I'm very happy tonight, because I get to enjoy next generation of games, good friends, play, get the providential ring. That's probably good. That is awesome. So I played like maybe 5 rounds. Oh, okay, alright. That was way back, right? Yeah, a long time ago. Guys all already pretty gamer. Just ready to get this game is only available on PS3. It actually makes sense. Also, like, I don't know, it's come to be known as a really strong PlayStation brand. There's a lot of... It saved gaming. It did. People still saved all video games. You went straight from ET to console. Yeah. And it was rocky in the middle. Explain the name. Want to tell you about the Souls? Should I be listening? Yes, this is very important. I remember Boletaria. Four ladies with it. Yeah, you want to read some bullshit? You sound more mystical. I think that I'm actually a bad second when it's my own
channeling the power of souls, brought unprecedented prosperity to his northern kingdom of Boletaria. That is, until the closed deep fog swept across the land. Boletaria was cut off from the outside world, and those who dared penetrate the deep fog never returned. But the Valifax of the royal twin flames broke free from the fog and told the world of Boletaria's plight.
Yeah. Oh, is there any different?
But the old King Alant had roused the old one, the great beast below the nexus, from its eternal slumber, and that a coupleless foe had fled, unleashed terrible demons. The deities hunt and run, claim their souls. Those who lose their souls lose also their minds. The Mallet attack the sane and chaos reigns. Valifax forces of the increasing power of the demon souls. Each kind of demon claims a human soul. The demon's own soul is invigorated by the life force, and the power of a mature demon soul is beyond human imagination. The legend spread quickly. Mighty warriors lured by the possibilities braved the fisher to breach the accursed land. But none have returned. The orb of the twin flames, yet the silent sheep. Saint Ben,
I just had chicken and vegetables. I thought it would be okay.
Skirva the Wanderer,
What's the baneful fawn? It's like a dog bone.
Forever granted so the world might be mended.
No, I haven't shaken in a while.
Soul of the lost withdrawn from its vessel.
If I skip it, so I get
Forever granted so the world might be mended.
Yeah, you're in the next one. So
the world
just
might
get
be
the
mended.
script test, right? And everyone knows.
This is the Nexus. It holds together the northern land of Voluntaria. Thou canst not split the Nexus, but the 5 Archstones will guide thee to the outer lands.
Yeah, you kind of want to look at that. Back. By the way, we should say what we're doing. Oh yeah. When all three of us die, we take a shot. It's like round robin. Yeah. So Lawrence will play. He'll die. Alana will play. She'll die. I'll play. I'll die, and then we all take a shot. We should probably rotate alignment too. So like, if you're the last one, then you become the first one to be the anchor. Yeah. So it's not always on somebody to not die or to die. Oh, I died. Does that count? I'm gonna say it counts for me because I want to take a shot. But you know what? Oh! What? Oh! What happened? Ken Kataragi gotcha. He gotcha. Oh my gosh. Chris, I don't want to dox you to Sony right off the top. You're gonna have to make that decision, Watch. Hey, rip for Demon Souls, huh? That's a shot. I mean, I'll take it. I'll also take a shot. I'll take a shot. What? Come on, video game. I put my hands on this. I hope I did. I don't. Right, give me the camera. I need to go on this Nexus. There's proof. Oh, I didn't get it back to you earlier. Oh. No, you did a great job of that. Very good. You died the Nexus is a prison of your soul. You cannot escape the Nexus. I disagree. Smush their hands on things. Thanks for trade controls. I am, unironically misty. There's no point in you sweating, you guys. It's an emotional moment. I know. No, April, I think that's genuinely what happened. I circumspect right into it. Do you look like she's okay? Kayla? Okay. I spoke that. So what was that?
Now I take my leave. There is something I must do.
Nope.
It's great. I don't know rules, but it's fun. It's food science. What the fuck? People say that. Yeah, I had a green bean burrito. You guys, that's okay. You're exactly right. FDA require you to like your quotes when you say clean and yes, you're correct. It is not too many. Taco Bell. They were testing all the ingredients are in giant bladders on the ceiling. And the reachable hose sprayed and put it in. We will get off this bridge someday. Okay. Technically, you did once, and then bullshit. Why is there a tank of them hitting your shit? Pulling the rim. Oh, I thought you Alright, who's next? Yeah, because I read the book long before I ever saw the movie. Hey, can I get a hands up in the Fantastic Beasts universe? Am I right? Well, Johnny Depp's not there anymore. That's a shame. Yeah. So I was told that Johnny Depp was innocent. Yeah, it's really good. Well, you're like things. I know he might. I was sure about that. I guess I need to be I was just trying to go from like that's what I've heard, and I've heard that. I think, in my opinion, at least at the worst, or I'm sorry, at the best, they're both good. Okay. Yeah. That's what it seems like, but also
Way above.
But Johnny Depp, I said, hey, Johnny Depp retired or whatever from Fantastic Beasts, and I was like, well, that's good because he was obviously like a terrible person. Everyone's like, no, he wasn't, and I was like, yeah, I don't know about that. Have you seen Love Diary? No, I don't think a terrible person. That's not true. I haven't seen it yet, but the trailers were fantastic. I mean, I saw that one. 98. 21 Jump Street. Guys, you know that bad people can do good things, right? You guys know that bad people can do good things? Numbers, this is Tumblr. We only think one thing. Oh, yeah, that's yeah, everyone says Kevin Spacey's mostly work. Come here. They do? Yeah. I have actually heard that. Yeah, apparently he's got great work ethic. I had heard the opposite. He's Kevin Spacey. Yeah, I heard the opposite. He was terrible. So, my mom knew him in high school, but she didn't tell me about the stuff that he did with the boys. Yeah, they're understanding.
I don't feel like the war is his fault.
That was PS5
breaking bug? Oh.
It didn't seem like he did that.
From what I've heard from the internet, this game is perfect.
Yeah.
And every PS5 is functioning great.
I mean, this game already crashed on his phone.
Yeah. No video, no PS5, no back.
You got the fine resin.
They just gotta figure out how to get it.
Bring my 7,000 watt active thing. Some fat ass buns for that PS5.
Wait, do you have a vape? I'm sorry, he has more than one vape.
Vaping is really bad.
Yeah, I'll tell them that my cancer ridden lungs.
Okay.
Alright, I will.
Vaping's really bad.
Sorry. I get bits every so often. Well, I gotta be at the. Come on, you guys are mad.
Oh, you're so cute. Look at you try.
Wearables.
Thanks, Appraisal 463. Oh, you got a pretty
This idiot. Right, he's got club too. Oh, we can double hand club. What am I doing? Single handed club.
He has a sword. What are you talking about?
Sure can. Check this out. Ooh, big strikes. Huge. He's the one with the shield though.
Yeah, it's pretty
Yeah, I just see that whole area.
Or it's a real gamer.
Arrow?
In anything. Yeah.
Suppose you're right.
You can knock the arrow back, much like a lightsaber does to a laser blast.
God damn it. I want to say you're wrong, but you're right.
Next time in the conversation. If you feel like you're speaking of, I have seen this. Definitely fell in the hole.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. It was a glitch.
That was not a glitch. He fell in the hole.
In Kataragi.
Fell in the air hole, you know what I'm saying? Is it soon?
What if you like? Let's say that you want a contest. It's like 5 minutes after off, and then you go in a room and you put a banana field everywhere. And you're like, maybe if he slips on one of them, his hands will fall off. His penis will go directly inside me.
Oh wow!
One of my first celebrity crushes was Sandra. Just one day he showed up at the IG on
What?
Yeah.
Oh, you did that thing. You failed. Couldn't confront.
I didn't want to do it, so I just.
Oh, you! Ow! Ow!
No,
There's two.
Lawrence.
There's two. Run. There's also a hole. Not with a hole.
Lawrence panicking.
A little bit.
Nice.
Gotta grips up. Gotta grips up, baby. Oh! That's what I say before my ship now, please. That's what I'm saying now. Ah!
Please, I can't do the bridge. You know, it's too many of them.
Please get to another. There we go. Got it.
Alright, this
Grass up.
gotta eat the late noon grass. My bad, guys. That's
Grass up.
It's a good shit. There was a blood stain there and everything. I should have. You see some Jerry light lines? Looks great.
Yeah, I see a little porch.
Looks great.
That doesn't look good.
I mean, good stuff. Good.
That's not real, bro.
It's big.
The character would never do
This
this.
is more real than you right now, to be Bruce.
I mean, you can say that about any video game.
Remember Charlie going down tracks and I was holding a
Yeah,
stick?
I don't think
And one was you and the other one was Dark Souls.
Create that much fun.
We have not waited
There it is.
Real little motherfuckers who don't tip it out.
Parry that,
by
dude.
the eye of the morning
He's
light.
dead.
We preserve the fabric of reality.
I thought the goal was to kill the demon.
They're not demons, they're zombies. Remember?
We haven't done this yet.
Fireball.
Once we do the scourge of demons.
No, I don't.
Oh! I feel like there's a trap here. Let's see what this little joker was up to.
In the
Wait a minute,
distance,
am I the last one? If I die with 6 shots,
under
I
the malevolent moon, world was united owing to the soul's heart.
I had to shoot.
I had looked in.
Until another sun heralds the reawakening of the old order. Across the land seeped a colourless, deep fog, and the world faced extinction at the hands of the demons. Thanks be, we were able to lull the old one back to its slumber, yet only after the loss of innumerable souls. through most of the world, lost, erased by the fog. In order to mend the fabric of what lands still remain, we entrusted 6 leaders with 6 precious archstones, one to the king of a small yet industrious land, one to the king of the burrows underground, one to the wise queen of the great ivory tower, one to the chieftain of lost and ill-fortunate souls, one to the shaman of the tempest worshipping shadow. Now, you have you the strength? Yes. Now, the old one.
Shit. Slept.
Brave. What is it? Seek us out. Of course. After. Go ahead. Let these vagabonds. Soul of mine, key to life's ether. I shall away the slayer of demons. I am here, and thee alone. Thou hast been touched. Soul of mine, key to life's ether. Soul of the lost, withdrawn from its vessels. Let's tread ground so the world might be mended. So the world might be mended. Art thou finished? May thy strength.
Are you here to fix so? I will help Sage Frey.
do it. Okay. Gotcha.
Time to forge ahead.
Thanks for that.
Oh, come on! Oh, that it should have been. It was that I was that close. It's like none of these. These weapons are not doing anything. They're too weak.
You names, it's simple. You trade with your souls. No interesting. You trade your souls. No interesting.
Thou then touch soul of mind, key to life's ether. Soul of life withdrawn from its vessels. Let's tread the ground so the world might be mended. So the world might be mended. Art thou finished?
Are you begging for a magic? careful how you use normally.